I welcome viewers to the panel discussion this afternoon on strategic planning and in particular network management systems. Before we get to look at the detail of network management systems, can I introduce myself and my distinguished panel guests. My name's James Kirkbride. To my left I've got Aaron Ettingen. Aaron is an entrepreneur now and a successful CEO of a global organisation. And to my right, I've got Stephen Jeremy, who's had a successful career in the military services, even faced the challenges of being in charge of strategy at Kabul at the British Embassy. Welcome, gentlemen. I don't know if you want to say a few words about yourself.
My background is really in the military and the Navy, but I've led, commanded ships, and I was in charge of strategy, as you say, in the British Embassy, so I know what strategy is about. And I've also written a book on how to make strategy, and I look at the relationship between military strategy and corporate strategy in that book.
Welcome, Stephen.
Well, my name is Aaron Ettingen. I'm the Chief Executive of the London School of Business and Finance. We also manage a portfolio of some 15 companies. In the last number of years, we grown 120% year on year. We acquired companies, some successful, some not successful companies. We turned them around very rapidly. When it comes to strategy, I like to think about a conventional strategy, but I also like to think about entrepreneurial strategy, which can be a little bit different.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Welcome to both of you. Now, viewers, no doubt you've enjoyed the opportunity to look at the case study for network management systems. Just a quick recap. Network management systems was developed by the entrepreneur Ray Edwards. It's been trading for around 3 years, successful with 3 products, one component, one systems, and one supporting systems, but now faces a number of challenges, which is not unusual with entrepreneurs. And it is those challenges that we're going to look at discuss this afternoon. Okay, the first challenge, or the challenge we want to discuss this afternoon, is all around adopting a discipline of strategic planning, trying to understand what is a strategy and why a strategy might be important. And 3 options that you've been given to look at are whether, in terms of developing a strategy, Ray should do it all by himself, whether he actually should outsource that to an external consultant, or whether he actually should involve more people, such as stakeholders. But before we get to considering the advice of our panel members on that, can I begin by asking Stephen, is it important for Ray to have a strategy?
I think it is, but I think it depends. Even before you go and think about what it is that he wants to do, he's got to think about what he wants to achieve. In my world, we say strategy answers the how question. How are we going to do this? And my first question to Ray, if I were in his situation, would be, what does he want? Is this about profit, or is this about something else in the business? So one of the most important things about strategy, and I think you do need a strategy, although it can take different forms, but the first question is really what's the objective? What are we trying to achieve? What's Ray trying to achieve with this company?
Okay, that's useful. Aaron, I mean, is that the approach you take? Did you find very, very early on, as you were developing an organisation, you had to think very carefully about the strategy, or did you discuss it with many other people?
Well, I think strategy is absolutely key, particularly for entrepreneurial company. Entrepreneurial companies, they would have advantages and disadvantages compared to more traditional, larger corporate organizations. So in the corporate world, they would typically have superior infrastructures, systems, scale, but they could be a little bit more slow sometimes, and their corporate strategy may be based on their competitive advantage. Now, entrepreneur needs to think hard about what is his competitive advantages, and wants to create his personal SWOT analysis. what are the SWOT analysis for his company in terms of positioning, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and threats, in terms of positioning for delivering certain products or services. So that's absolutely vital for the survival of the business. Whether he should prepare it himself or he should work with people, well, the first thing which is absolutely imperative, regardless who does it, is research. So that's again, it's great if he can do as much as possible by himself, simply because he will get a feel of it. But equally, it's something which needs to be really delegated and outsourced to a professional firm. The next stage is consultation. I mean, yes, the entrepreneur would have the gut feeling and would have this creative set of mind of how take this data and look at all the products and services on the market and find his own niche, his own way to place himself competitively in the marketplace. But it's also very, very handy to have a consultation group of people with experience to say, but hey, what if? And it's very good if they come from different backgrounds, maybe from marketing, from operational, from financial, and not some from entrepreneurial, but not just.
Would that group be as with the option 2 for our viewers to consider? Would that group who challenges the entrepreneur, would they be internal people or would they be external people?
Well, in my experience, it should be really both. Because the internal people, a lot of the times, they are really much closer to the customer. They understand the issues a lot better, and they could definitely remind the entrepreneur about the fundamentals within the business. Because entrepreneurs are really thinking about the next big thing. So for entrepreneurs, it's actually very, very easy to forget about the fundamentals. But consulting externals, it's so much more powerful because externals see that organization from external perspective. They're absolutely independent, so they wouldn't be worried about challenging that superior force, because in entrepreneurial companies, CEO entrepreneur may be a little bit more powerful, so there are the issues of...
There's an interesting issue, and I completely agree with Aaron on the idea of get the information, get the data. In my world, we call that reconnaissance, and that's important. It's absolutely critical. And so all too many times we make mistakes because we haven't done the reconnaissance. But the challenging team, I would call them a red team, again, in my world. And then the red team, I think it's important to distinguish between those people who might help you in formulating the strategy and those people who might help you in challenging it once you've actually made it. And that role, I think, is best fulfilled by people who are a little bit detached. Actually, if you've been involved in the formulation of the strategy, then you own it to a certain extent, and you're a little bit less likely to take criticism. Whereas the red team can say, well, actually, have you guys thought about this? And that's really important.
Mm. So that's interesting, because from my perspective, when I read over the 3 options, I saw solution B as being as if you were outsourcing the strategy. And I always thought strategy had to be owned and come internally. Am I wrong?
I personally think it's much better if strategy is developed internally, and I think there are fundamentally 2 options. The first is to actually, for the entrepreneur to do it himself and then work it through with his team, or secondly to do it in a collaborative sense with his team. Actually, but I agree with you. I think actually strategy that is made externally is weaker, because it's imposed on people, whereas if they've been part of it in the creation, then they feel an ownership for it, and you're more likely to see it properly executed.
Oh. That ownership of strategy interests me, because having developed that strategy, it's crucial for an entrepreneur, as you say, Aaron, not to forget about the operations. So how does an entrepreneur make sure, as with Ray, that the strategy as formulated is communicated well?
That's an absolutely key, and there are a number of things. It helps if key people involved in the creation of the strategy, especially the people who are going to be affected. And if they have been involved in the process, that is much easier to drive that change. But then it just helps just to communicate that. And it sounds simple, but there are so many companies who just don't communicate, and then there's this divide between the knowledge which is there in the boardroom and the knowledge which is there on the ground.
Yeah. I think there are a range of ways you can communicate it, and so much depends on the circumstances of the case and the nature and build-up of the company. But I think the leaders have got to get out and talk to people. And the great advantage of getting out and talking to people is that you pick stuff up as well. So you can detect actually if people don't quite think this idea is right or that. So you get quite a good interrelationship, I think, if you can get out on the ground. And I would call that walking the ship, but it's the same thing.
Managing by walking, yes.
The ship, not the plank.
Could be the plank.
Yeah. So going back to the scenario and the matters that our viewers have been considering, and they've been offered 3 solutions. Are any of those a preferred solution, or did they miss the point?
I think of the solutions, again, I'm always very reluctant when talking to people about how best to make strategy to actually give them a tailored solution and say this is the right one. It very much depends on the circumstances, and it very much depends, critically to my mind, on the character of the top team. What's the nature of the top team? Is this an organisation which is run by the entrepreneurial leader? He drives it forward and that's the way they operate, or is it more collaborative? So I think actually the rightness or wrongness of the strategy will depend on the character and makeup of the team. So I'm reluctant to say this one is right, that one's not. I sense, though, this particular circumstance, if you asked me to come off the fence,
yes.
I think this is an opportunity for a bit more collaborative strategy, because I sense part of the problem is Ray has been running on his own. And I see the evidence for that in terms of morale. Doesn't sound to be too good. And he seems to have lost a bit of sight of the overall direction of the business himself.
Good. So a collaborative one is the way to move forward. Aaron, do you agree?
Well, there are two things which we really need to consider. On one hand, the company is forecasted to lose £365,000. The company don't have great cash reserves. So there's the issue that whatever we're going to do, it has to happen fast. So there's a crisis, and it's great because it's an opportunity to unite the people, to drive change, and let's face it, there has to be a solution for us to survive. So as a leader, it's actually it's a real opportunity. There is a value of involving people, and simply to make it a success, absolutely, he has to involve. It's regarding solution B, where he'll just bring in somebody from an outside. It says bring an external consultant. Well, I wouldn't bring an external consultant, but let's say if I'm running that business and I have an opportunity to work with Michael Dell, who designed my strategy, then yeah, I would trust Michael Dell to do it. So there are always exceptions, but I would say that entrepreneur needs to have a good idea in terms of how he's going to navigate that business into a success, but he needs to engage people in the process.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much, gentlemen. I mean, from the viewer's point of view, perspective that I'm hearing is that strategy is important. Apologies for the shipping analogy, but it's got to steer a correct course. And for the entrepreneur, needs others to assist in developing and testing that strategy, which seems to be erring towards solution C with a little bit of B, recognising the flexibility of strategy development. Hope you found that of interest, and thank you again.